Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you're enjoying the content, please drop us up, drop a like, and let us know your thoughts below in the comments. Also, please consider supporting our podcast via the link below. It really helps us out.
David, welcome back to the show, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, brother. How you doing?
Can't complain. It's another day in what seems to be this crazy last couple of months. Um, I know we got limited time and loads to go through, so let's just do a quick intro for yourself, what you guys are doing, and then we'll hop into the question from the last guest, and then we'll just hop right into all things that are going on in the world.
Yeah, thanks, man. Well, my name is David Rand. I'm a podcaster and political consultant. And we've been running the Human Reaction podcast here for a year and change, almost up to 100 episodes. And we've been able to get monetized. And we recently passing some barriers, getting more members in and offering new swag like my polo I'm wearing here, and starting to build our brand and get access to new folks. And really excited how all that's coming along.
Awesome. Guys, obviously the link will be in the description for that, so go check all that stuff out. And then the question from the last guest is, who has had the biggest impact on your life, on you in your life? Could be living or dead.
Oh man, in my life, well, in my life as a whole, it would definitely be my father, right? I watched him before I was born, when my older brother was little. They lived in a van in Yellowstone. That was it. Like, they lived in a van. They were camper lifing it way before camper lifing was cool, right? And they went from that to a middle class, life in my lifetime, watching them build by hard work, dedication, by sacrifice and vision, a life for themselves. And he's an incredibly inspiring person. One of the smartest, most Renaissance men you'll ever meet. But never graduated. Got an associate's degree, but never went to college or university. And just, he's the kind of guy who could take apart a car, a computer, or a person in an argument, all in one go. Like, he is just something else. I'm just truly an inspiration.
That's phenomenal. I feel like education, information is so available these days, which I feel like, I don't know. I don't remember if we talked about this last time, but I mentioned on the show before the like future of education and what the piece of paper actually means, and then how kind of, as we move forward into this wild west of like how to really tell if a person knows something without letting them like do it first. Like, you don't want a doctor to be like, yeah, I learned from YouTube. It's like, and then they cut you open. It's like, that's probably not a good idea. But
Right.
navigating that part, I think will be an interesting transition, as are a lot of things in the world these days. So, for those listening, reference point, I go watch the first episode that we did together. So afterwards we talked, okay, we'll do another one closer to the election and we'll see what's going on. So after the first debate, I was like, ooh, that was interesting. Let me reach out to David and see if he wants to come back on the show. We had some scheduling things here and there. But in the meantime, Biden was, we'll say, voluntold to leave the race.
Voluntold, that's a good word.
Voluntold to leave the race. Trump was shot in the head. Kamala Harris is now being portrayed as like the second coming of something, and she chose the guy that let Minneapolis burn down as her VP pick, and then a bunch of other stuff has happened as well. So, of course, I went on vacation for part of it, so I missed part of it. But I guess we could start with maybe the debate and the fallout for Biden, and then kind of maybe go from there. I definitely want to touch on the Trump assassination and kind of the fallout from that as well. But let's start with kind of the Biden into the Harris thing and just your thoughts generally, and maybe summarize what happened for kind of the people listening that haven't been paying so much attention, and your thoughts on that generally.
Yeah. So I think one of the things from a political consultant point of view and a communications professional point of view, at least one of the things that's very interesting about the debate is when it's timed. You have this phenomena of a later than usual Democrat convention, a Republican convention that hasn't even happened yet, although it's so the debate is earlier in the calendar than usually is. And for some reason, they agreed to these debate standards that appear on first glance to look like they would benefit Biden in some major way because it prevents Donald Trump from talking over him. But in reality, really set the stage for Donald Trump to look less of a bully and less of like he's like kicking the pants out of an old man, and more like, I don't know, seeing Biden just space out when he's not on camera, and kind of the no one's there weekend at Bernie's kind of experience that we've had with Biden for some time, if you've been paying attention, is suddenly revealed to a much larger audience. And it's very strange that it would happen before they were actually the Republican and Democrat Party official candidates. So between the rules and the timing, it really set up the dynamic that we currently have found ourselves in, where Biden has effectively been pushed out. Donald Trump, although I think the polls are latent, probably under measuring broader support. Every poll is always modeled on likely voters. And I think it's going to be a tremendous energy input for his campaign. That's what typically happens with assassination attempts. So they typically, if the person survives, that party becomes much stronger and have a lot more popular support afterwards. We just don't like political violence. We tend to reward the opposite of wherever that's heading in America when it gets coverage. And that's the other part of it too, is it's been shocking to me to the degree to which the assassination attempt has been met with a first shock, and then a week later we're like, yeah, but the Olympics are like super gay and weird, huh? Like it's a very strange media cycle that's happened since then. So to what degree that's going to be effect, I don't know, but I think it's a very interesting question. And then lastly, what the heck was Biden's campaign thinking? He's not all the way there. That your best appeal is probably to make Trump look like a bully and a mean person. Why do these debate rules, and why do it when you do it? And that's where the conspiracy starts to kick in a little bit, like, oh, maybe this was actually a planned transition for some time. It allows them to say it was just a bad debate performance, that he's a bad debater, but can still be a good president. Hence all the arguments around the team being so important around him before the debates. And then afterwards, that really kind of helps set the stage for our current situation.
Yeah, 100%. I think was super interesting as well was the no audience thing. I think was meant to help Biden as well, because there's nothing for Trump to kind of play off of as he goes off the cuff as he usually does. The other thing that I thought was very interesting was actually, did you see the thing that happened on Colbert, I think yesterday or the day before?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those listening that don't know what it was, Stephen Colbert had some lady from CNN on, and Colbert says something to the effect of like CNN is objective and reports unbiased news or whatever, and the audience laughs. And the CNN lady was like, "Was that supposed to be a laugh line?" And he was like, "No." And it kind of, to your point about the coverage of the media, it's like, okay, so the media went from Biden's sharpest attack to all of a sudden he needs to step down to, okay, Trump got shot, and then all of a sudden after that, it's like you said, the Olympics, and it struck me as very weird because even in like the Twitter world of the people that pay attention to these things, even they went over to the Olympic type of thing as well. Go ahead.
Well, one thing to kind of amend there, and I might have given a false impression. What actually stole the assassination narrative out of the Trump camp hands was Biden's withdrawal. So it's actually
that too, yeah.
use, right? One, you put a new brand in, you have all this latent, and this explains the polling right now of most of it being within margin. You have all this latent anxiety from the Democrats now saying, oh, I now have something new to focus my energies on. And also it's a black woman, and also, et cetera. So it's a very interestingly timed to take away the focus from the assassination attempt and back to Biden and Kamala and that dynamic.
Yeah.
So that immediately kills the momentum and sympathy that the Trump administration had, or Trump candidacy had.
Yeah. So in that week also, or around that time, we had the hearing with the director of the Secret Service, and that was also very interesting because you had somebody like AOC, who you wouldn't normally think, like you had people on the Republican side, and then you had somebody like AOC who's like, well, on the screen is that way, but anyways, asking questions like good questions, which, not that she can't ask good questions, but it wouldn't benefit her party, you would think, because this is Biden's kind of executive branch, and the Secret Service falls under, I think it falls under the executive branch, but in any event, they're under his administration. And so the kind of widespread from everyone in that hearing was interesting as well. To then have her step down and then immediately have it disappear, that was also very interesting to me because you've got these congressmen and senators who are saying we need accountability, we need this, we need that, and then it's like okay, the lady resigns, but then that's it, and then I don't know. So the whole everything just happened very quickly, and it seems I don't know. For me, it was very difficult to keep up with all of it.
Yes.
Um, so I want to touch on that, and then also, do you see the Seymour Hersh reporting on how the Biden thing happened?
I did.
Oh, and touch on that a little bit as well, because I do not remember it well enough to explain it.
Yeah. So I think your summary is well put. The withdrawal, I mean, like as far as like a Biden pulling out and Seymour's reporting, basically what that suggested was it was a kind of an internal coup, right? Kamala collaborated with Obama, collaborating with Nancy Pelosi to basically threaten in Article 25, which or Amendment 25th Amendment, which said that if the president can't conduct its function, that the Congress can take action to withdraw a president, as a president without impeachment, because impeachment was the only rule we had until we passed the 25th Amendment, which then said, okay, also they can remove for if they can't do their service. And that's to prevent the puppet presidency phenomenon, right? And we've suffered that from before, both under FDR and Woodrow Wilson. We had periods where the president wasn't really the president. It was run by cabinet staff and the president's wife, interestingly, especially with Woodrow Wilson. So I think there's, that threat does make sense, right? Because if you're Biden, you're his age, you've ginned yourself up to, I'm going to take on and defeat Trump again. Even if you're very attached to that vision for your life, what matters even more than that is your legacy. And being the only president ever to be removed by the 25th Amendment would be, I would guess he would consider to be a tarnish on that legacy. So that makes sense for his motive. It makes sense for the right people in the right place. It makes sense from we just don't have any material evidence. We don't have the phone call, the letter, the stationery that says, "Don't forget to tell Biden to drop out of the race." Right. So it doesn't meet like a criminal standard, but it meets, I think, a reasonable suspicion standard for anybody who's, want to make sure you're not believing something false. And Seymour is one of the best reporters in American history. Period. He's way better than Woodward and Bernstein. He's way higher than most of the folks that people typically look to as a media professional when it comes to that hierarchy. I mean, he's the guy reason why we had know about the My Lai massacre. He's the guy that broke open many things that had to do with the Pentagon files. He's a institution for a good reason.
Yeah, I can't help but remembering when the letter broke. And all the memes went around like, oh, I wonder if when Biden wakes up from his nap, he'll realize what happened. It's like, ugh.
Yeah.
So, okay. So then we've got this threat of the 25th Amendment, maybe, allegedly. But then we're left with, okay, so if he's not with it enough to run a campaign, but he's still with it enough to be the president for 4 more months or however many months it was at the time, 3 now. And then there's nobody's seen him in a while. I think there was a picture of him at the beach, maybe, but like, so who, like the whole thing makes no sense, right? It's one story after another, and to be left asking kind of these sorts of questions, it's tough to get to the maybe even a real theory on them because before you know it, the next thing will happen. So okay, I'm all over the place a little bit because we got so much to cover and not that much time. But okay, let's jump back to I want to jump back to the Secret Service and the Trump thing for a bit, and then we'll kind of go into politically what we're looking at maybe for the next 3 months or so. So it seemed, for those who don't know, the Secret Service perimeter seemed to look like a Pac-Man, as you guys mentioned on your show. And
Yeah.
there's all these questions as to like, how did this kid get on the roof? You have videos from all these former snipers being like, that's a super easy shot. Like, we're lucky that Trump turned his head at that moment. What do you make of, is it like complete ineptitude, or is it I heard somebody say, well, it's obviously what it looks like it is. And I think there's some saying like never attribute to malice, which you can attribute to incompetence or something like that. But this seems a little bit much. I don't know. And then to have it followed by that hearing.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that as you've dug through the research and the different reporting and the different videos, right? We got the guy saying, look, he's on the roof like 20 minutes before the shooting or whatever, the redheaded guy. And there's multiple videos like that. What have you been able to glean from all this stuff, and then also the subsequent kind of the similarity, the lone shooter, right? And all
Yes.
these things. What have you guys been able to glean from that in the past couple weeks?
Well, I think something you said, never attribute to malice what you can attribute to incompetence. I think that applies as a good general rule for maintaining good relationships between individuals. It should not apply to a government. A government exists to wield power. When you're in the business of wielding power, specifically when you're in the business of wielding power covertly, using lies, manipulation, and the destruction of individuals as your means to maintenance of that power, and then what I'm referring to here is the CIA, and for certain practices by domestic intelligence agencies such as the FBI as well. And when I'm talking about there is entrapment, and there's lots of entrapment cases that we could talk about. There, you should not. You should actually probably have the opposite inclination. Unless you can prove that is incompetence, you should assume that anything that looks too coincidental is not a coincidence, right? And I think what we've articulated as, and Kyle, I'll give my co-host Kyle credit here, is sophisticated incompetence. Right, you have this strange combination of the Secret Service not showing up in the morning briefing, apparently a standard operating procedure that does not put local police on the same comms channel as Secret Service, which is strange. That came out in congressional testimony with Mike Lee, Senator Mike Lee. And you have the very strange set of circumstances that the overwatch of the site appears to not have been manned. Meanwhile, the situation, the proximity, the not flagging or following someone who has a rangefinder right off the bat. This is hours beforehand where he's coming in and out. There are a series of other circumstances that are completely unanswered. And these are the simplest ones, right? These are the Richard Epstein didn't hang himself sort of questions, right? Where did the explosives come from? He had explosives in his car. We know that. Where did he get the sophisticated detonator technology? You can't just get remote detonators for fireworks just anywhere. That's a hard thing to get. How did he get that without flagging anything? How was he able to fly a drone in the area prior to the event? How do you not lock down that close of a building is the simplest one. But beyond that, I mean, it's not posting someone on the building. It's where did the Overwatch go and why weren't they there? Those kind of explanations really just you can't get around them with, well, it's just incompetence. No, that's not how that works. These aren't the sort of questions you can just leave off on incompetence. These are key critical questions. Last one, why haven't we gotten a picture of him as an adult or any particular motive? Right. Even if it's but one of the mental models we use to break this down is there's a couple different mental models for assassination in terms of why the motives typically are, right? You have the crazy person motive, right? This is the guy who tried to shoot Reagan to impress Jane Fonda. You have the political narrative, which is I'm simply a radical who hates this person because of their party, right? That would be Lincoln, right, for example, and for policy or whatever. And then you have the school shooter phenomena, which is I'm doing this to become famous. I'm doing this to leave my mark on a world that hates me and has rejected me or whatever. The resentment based, which is often tied into the politics too. It's only separated in the fact that its primary motivation is about spitting in the face of God rather than, I'm going to do this to change public policy. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I think what we all, much of the right assumed it was the second category. It was, someone who's politically motivated. I think much of the left assumed it's the first category or just can't be, or just is kind of ignoring the question, just not asking the question because it's too inconvenient for their mental model about who this person is as president, and their own maybe sense of guilt over their rhetoric. And then thirdly, I think the coincidence of not being able to have any real profile of the person definitely leans me in that direction of, well, there could be one of the reasons why you never get answers to things is when you have a press complicit with, agents of the government who really just don't want to tell them things. And then we'll go into what we call, it's an intelligence services. One I'm thinking about now. Hold on. Let me remember this word because it's really important. It's called a limited hangout. So a limited hangout is you release just enough information to satisfy curiosity, but never actually gets to anything that actually allows you to hold anyone accountable, right? So this is from the Nixon files. It goes way back. But the basic idea is that, we got some information about him, but it's pithy information that gives us no real context into his motivation or even methods of how this happened. And so what I'm curious about is there's supposedly this investigation. It's all being held in the executive branch. It's not an independent investigation. Now, to get this clear, when JFK was assassinated, the Congress established an independent investigation, right, into that phenomenon. Now, what we put on that investigation were people like Alan Dulles, the former director of the CIA, whom JFK had fired. Right. So it wasn't a perfect committee, but at least it was independent from the executive branch itself that had failed. Right. Even if you have an executive branch that failed in terms of the FBI not knowing this person was coming, the the NSA, who's spying on all of us, incidentally, supposedly, not seeing this guy coming, and then the Secret Service obviously failing in such an epic way, and then obviously lying about many things afterwards, such as the slopeness of the roof being the reason why, or that the Donald Trump administration, that the Trump campaign hadn't requested more services. So if you have the executive branch investigate themselves, what's the likely outcome?
Well, they didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, or just that. Oh, it was just some mistakes made. Many mistakes were made, are bad. The lead lady resigned. That's all you really need. Right. And I guarantee you there's some think tank job waiting for her.
Yeah.
So I'm incredibly pessimistic about that, except for the fact that what you cited, AOC and other people of the left who are actually concerned about their own safety under protection of the Secret Service, because they know that those categories exist.
Yeah. The slope of the roof answer was just mind-boggling to me. It's like
Yeah.
that. You don't even have to think about a follow-up question to really debunk that. And it's like, did she really think that was a good idea to answer that question? Like anyone, it left me quite honestly, a bit speechless. Like, it's like, oh yeah, we didn't put anyone there because the roof was sloped. It's like, really?
Yeah.
It's like, did you, like, okay, you're trying to like deflect or whatever, but come up with something better than that. Like, honestly. And it's
just bad lying.
It was. It really was. And it's like, did you think for 2 seconds before you said that? It's like, well, probably not. But like, that's the thing with some of these answers is like, it's so patently like you just have to ask one follow-up question, and then all of a sudden, whatever was said kind of crumbles, dissipates, whatever word you want to use.
To quote the great Nancy Mays, she was full of shit today, right? I like that. That was the argument. That was such a spike because everyone can tell, yeah, this person's obviously just lying to the public to cover their own ass.
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, I don't know if we'll ever know. And that's a bit unfortunate, but I think it's good to just detail all those questions that are still out there. Go ahead.
Well, Eric, we could know. We could, but we have a government so unaccountable, so distant from the average person that we might not. You're right. Or it'll be 50 years from now when things get declassified. We still don't know about the JFK assassination. You know why? They say because of it could release methodologies and actors to further scrutiny by America's enemies. When it was a domestic assassination that happened in America.
Well, I would hope they aren't using the same methodologies 60 years later. Yeah. So I don't know. It's interesting. The role of the press definitely is very important as well, and I think that's very understated. And when people talk about free society and democracy, they're like people get wrapped up in, well, the government is supposed to kind of, in theory, would be there to protect individual rights, and then how do you hold that government accountable? It's like, well, you have people like Seymour Hersh who are holding them accountable. Like that's how you do it. It's the check and balance is not necessarily within the government itself, although they are written in the Constitution. It's the independence of, right, the informed public or populace or whatever the exact phrase is, and journalism in that way. And to me, at least, that's the biggest reason kind of why we are in where we are now, is because you have a clip like on Colbert where they're like, oh yeah, CNN is objective, and everybody's like, LOL, no, you're not.
Exactly. And the real tragedy is that we've drifted so far away from those fundamental principles where you have, agents of the press who are purchased by and are so worried about losing their access to government officials, they just print anything that the government tells them to by fact, right? And that could explain a tremendous amount of reporting around Ukraine, a tremendous amount of reporting around like Nord Stream pipeline, for example. These sorts of things the system has become so incestuous at the elite level that people just don't trust anymore. They don't trust CNN for a good reason, right? Think about this way. With the Trump assassination, right now, 1/5, was it 1/5 or 1/4? Let me look it up real quick. Make sure I get my numbers right. 1/5 of all Americans believe that the Trump assassination was likely conducted by the FBI or someone, and to take FBI, not as like the specific agency, but someone in the government.
Sure.
1/3 of all Republicans do. 1/3. Right. That's
Yeah.
higher. That more people think that than care about things like immigration or the war in Gaza.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's a huge amount. Now also 1/3 of Biden supporters think that Trump faked it. Right. So that's the moment we're in. That perfectly illustrates the internet moment where we're completely different echo chambers. We don't really understand what's going on around the world. We see the same car crash, but we have completely different explanations for it. That said, there's way more people who are willing to look at that scenario and not just say, like in the past, like during JFK assassination, there's just no way that the U.S. government could possibly have been involved either by intent or by negligence, intentional negligence in this thing, or that, for example, some reporting came out that said that there was a cell phone tower ping associated with this guy's house that also happened to be close to Langley, meaning near the FBI building in D.C. That had some association there. Now, who is that? What does that mean? We don't know. That could be anything. That could be just a coincidence. That said, that reporting would have been completely dismissed 50 years ago, but today is seen as, wow, that's a really important piece of information because it's very possible the government could be involved. And that skepticism is a good thing because
Very
it
good.
questions power rather than just assumes, oh, the government's just out here to look out for me.
Yeah. And now also everyone's got cameras on their phones. And so, right, with JFK, there's the Zapruder footage, and that's about it. And then now we've got a gazillion cell phone videos out there from all sorts of different angles and all sorts of different. We got the text from the counter sniper teams and the timestamps on those, and all so much more information is available now. It's good for. The only difficulty I would say is sorting through everything, and it's very easy to, like you said, end up in your own sort of bubble where it's like, oh, you're convinced that it is fake and it didn't happen, or you're convinced one way or the other. Okay, so and the other thing with kind of the media piece, Dave Smith uses the term message discipline. So out of that event, the convention happens, Trump officially gets the nomination. You can tell he's a bit different, right? More subdued a little bit. Maybe subdued is not the right word. Maybe more reflective. And JD Vance is the VP pick. I did not know much about him prior, and then shortly after he's picked, apparently he's just weird. And so that was also very strange to me that like that's what they went with. Like calling somebody weird is something that I did in like third grade. So I don't really know, like, what do you make of that and that choice in particular? Because there's like, what are they like? I haven't seen anything specific that they've pointed to that makes him weird. And of all the people that I've seen running around in the political sphere, he seems not that weird. So what do you make of all that?
Okay, so I think weird is the best way for them to attack them without violating the thing that they said they were going to do after the Trump assassination, which was lower the temperature, right? It's an attack. I mean, and Trump's going around right now just saying Kamala has a low IQ, just like Biden, right? And he's saying they're not smart. That's not a strong attack per se, right? It does try to needle at where they're vulnerable. And hey, I mean, Trump's an eccentric dude, right? Like he talks weird. He behaves in strange ways. Like he's an entertainer, right? And that, by the nature of it, if you consider, if Tim Walz is who he says he is, which he's not, but if he says who he is, he's just like this salter of the earth school teacher, veteran guy, and that's the whole story to him. If he was really just as he portrays himself and not a political actor that's complicated, then you could say, oh yeah, he's the weird one compared to me. But the reality is he's weird compared to what? The average American? Well, all the political actors are weird compared to average Americans. Why? Because they don't have regular jobs. They're Congress people and business people on that are elite by the very nature of it. Because we don't select, normies for these jobs. We try to select people who are extra qualified and actually have leadership capabilities and things like that. So by the very definition, they're not. And then obviously running on a misinformation campaign about JD Vance having sex with a couch. right? And things like that, like actual legit misinformation in order to basically try to meme their way into the office. And that's the idea. You want to say something coyly, right? You want to make jokes about something that's false in order to get your own supporters excited and riled up, depress their excitement, and create a sense of momentum that this is inevitable. And that's really what we've seen, right? It's most of the attack of weird that doesn't surprise me too much. Most of, I think 99% of the effort is actually in just trying to make Kamala look like a historic event, right? Rather than a person, right? So you're going to elect Kamala, similar to Barack Obama. You're going to elect her because she's a black woman, and that being the major feature of her campaign. It has nothing to do with what her words are. What her public policy speaking is for perfectly fine, but she doesn't do any interviews, right? And but I don't think the left is demanding that, right? The question is for moderates and middle road voters, and independents going to demand that in order to vote for her. And if you make it enough about her, about what she means as a symbol, then it doesn't matter what her content is, because the content is the symbolism of us being a tolerant nation that can elect a black woman.
What do you make of the Vance VP pick from a policy / balancing out Trump perspective / like politically? I think there was a lot of people that I saw that were hoping he would pick Vivek. But what do you make of that? What do you make of the pick from a political standpoint?
Yeah, he's a safer pick than Vivek for quite a few reasons. He's more of a national conservative than Vivek is. Vivek is much more libertarian. And so because of that, and better on, because Vivek is better on Israel, Vance is the better pick. Because Vivek's position on Israel is probably not popular amongst the specifically the Christian right and various different factions of the traditional right. He comes from an important state, Ohio. That said, I'm not sure to what degree that really gets him electoral votes of substance. But he does have a very particular story, right? So if the strategy of the Trump wing of the party is to make the Republican Party the white working class party that cares most about passing policy to help that class of people or at least is able to articulate sympathy for them, J.D. Vance is an excellent pick because of hillbillyology and his work prior to becoming a senator on that, specifically telling a story about rural white poverty in terms of, hey, this is not a solution that you can just throw money at and get solutions to. Individuals actually have to do something here and make a difference in their own communities and their own lives to better improve these problems of white poverty. And I think, like that, raising that issue of white poverty to the national stage is really important for the Republicans to do, right? In order for them to build their coalition that they see is needed to do well in states like Pennsylvania and Michigan and stuff like that. The last part of J.D. Vance is he represents a substantial shift in terms of the tech industry. So he's how would I say, Peter Thiel? Do you know who Peter Thiel is?
I loosely.
Yeah, he wrote the book 0 to 1, and he was the original PayPal founder. He's part of what they call the PayPal mafia. So you got
yes.
Elon Musk and a range of other people who are all involved in this first startup on e-commerce. That is now an enormous company, PayPal is. But they've all since checked out and all done new stuff. He also runs Palantir, which is a private national security intelligence agency. Is a way to think about that. I'm not sure that's exactly the right way to put it, but effectively they're private spies for online. For the national intelligence state. And Thiel himself is, he's kind of leans libertarian. He's been influenced, but he's been a longtime Trump supporter since 2016, spoke at the National Convention for Trump, and actually flew J.D. Vance out to apologize to Trump when he decided to run for Senate in Ohio after J.D. Vance originally criticized Trump a lot when he was, after he had published Hillbillyology. We've seen a lot of people in the tech sector move in that direction, and it's kind of forming a new power structure base in the Republican Party that is substantially different when it comes to things like war, privacy, and stuff like that. So I think that could be a big difference maker in the long run. That's what he represents. Lastly, the strategic angle. If you assassinate Trump, you now get a young guy who's able to pick up and articulate the America First agenda. If you hamper his presidency, the next guy who can run can now be another guy who's able to marshal a similar crowd. And you kind of get like a passing of the torch to another political actor that's very clearly aligned to him. So if you're China and you don't want a trade war, well, guess what? If you take out Trump, you have a guy who even wants it even more, right? Like all those things become worse, sans Trump.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a very good summation. Um, okay, so we touched on Kamala Harris and her kind of the symbology. One thing I did find funny was she had the one speech right after she kind of was the new nominee. She's like, "Oh, if you want to say something, come say it to my face." And then JD Vance shows up to her plane and he's like, "Oh, you want to come talk to me?" And then she's not there. Um, I found that amusing relatively. Um, so she picks Tim Walz. I don't think a lot of people know a lot about him other than he's from Minnesota. So I want to touch on the Tim Walz pick a little bit. Not that it's super important, but then I want to get to the debates because I think they had originally agreed to a couple and then now it's one, and kind of what we think will go on um at the debates given Kamala's maybe uh brilliance off script.
Yeah, I just depends on how much wine she's had that day. You know,
Yeah. Oh,
she's America's wine mom.
That's the Michael Malice.
That's a
Oh,
Michael Mouse thing. I meme on that all the time. It's
that is
perfect.
that
So,
clip by that clip. Everyone should go watch it. It is amazing.
yes. So what was your question again, brother? I'm sorry, I kind of lost track.
The Tim Walz pick. Who is
Yes.
he? Kind of, you mentioned if he was that, which he's not. But
Mhm.
who is he? What should people know about him? What are your thoughts on that as a pick? I don't. When also has the Democratic convention actually happened? I don't even know.
I think it's supposed to
Everyone
happen this weekend. Yeah, we were just actually asking this, like, when is this thing supposed to happen? And it does look like they're setting debate dates now. So the next round of debates hopefully happen in September,
are
October.
we? So actually, I'll take one step back. Do you think that we might be in for another surprise, or
Oh,
no? You think it's set?
oh yeah, there'll be more surprises.
Like from the convention specifically.
Oh, you mean like maybe a different candidate, other
Yeah,
Democrats?
like somehow there's a infighting in the party and the delegates decide maybe like we don't want to vote for her. Yeah, I don't
No.
think so either. And that was super interesting because I saw another um maybe hypothesis that because Obama didn't come out directly and endorse her, and that
Yeah.
Biden did that, and it was I don't know, but the whole thing just seemed very weird. And then they're like Trump's a threat to democracy, but then they have this lady who nobody actually voted for ever. Um, so I don't know what it like. Yeah,
Correct.
thoughts on like kind of the Democratic Party, the Tim Walz pick, generally what they're kind of looking to do. There seems to be some infighting, maybe how they'll consolidate, or kind of what are your thoughts on those that sort of general scenario?
Sure. So I don't think it's likely we see any changes from the ballot from here. I do think there'll be major October surprises coming up. I think one of those is in Tim Walz's backyard. The rumblings are starting now, and I don't think it's going to get so substantial that it's going to mean a pullout or anything like that. But Tim Walz's record of claiming to have served in a combat role when he had, in fact, had not served in a combat role um, is, I think, going to be a spike. It's going to be a major spike against that campaign. It's going to be very difficult to overcome because stolen valor arguments like that are very contentious, and it
Yeah,
lights up a lot exactly the people that he's supposed to be bringing to the Democrat Party, which is white working class. So Tim Walz, he kind of does a lot of like the folksy kind of salt of the earth kind of guy. He's like, I'm a teacher and I was a veteran, and here in Minnesota we do it like this, and we're neighborly, and we're like these things, and we're not weird. We're not afraid of women. I don't know that why he thinks
I don't know.
JD Vance is afraid of women. We know Trump's not afraid of women, but uh, so I don't. These are kind of pithy arguments. I don't think they really take them very far, but they are necessary to make. Right? These are the things that you got to fill a speech with. When you're thinking about Tim Walz, what I would consider what he kind of represents is also fighting over the same ground that Trump and JD Vance are currently taking from the left, meaning white middle class working votes. People who are going to have the biggest problem voting potentially in their mental model of the world for a black woman. I don't think those people would have any problem voting for a black woman if they legitimately felt that she was able to understand and articulate and empathize with their role, position, status in the world, etc. But either they realistically understand that Kamala can't or won't. She's a lawyer from San Francisco. She's one of the most liberal senators ever, and she dated Montel Williams. I mean, like these are the things that she's obviously running in different circles than your average farmer in Iowa, right? So she's in a they're their view of the world would require them to very specifically cultivate someone who can bring in that vote, because that's what you need to win the middle America votes to swing the states far enough to get the electoral votes you need. Um, I'm not sure that Hillary Clinton and Kamala are so far apart in the American consciousness that they can see that they don't need Tim Walsh at that point to be competitive in certain set of states that have a big enough rural populations. So therefore, that's kind of how he represents. I kind of see him now. Will there be a change at the delegation? Ironically, the the Democrats, despite having the name Democrat in their party, is the least Democratic party. Right. I mean, like, they have a super delegate. What's a super delegate? Does
I
anyone
don't
know what a
actually.
super delegate is?
I
But
don't
the
know.
very word is absurd and undemocratic. Just think about it for a minute. Some group of people, because they represent a particular faction that brings in lots of money for the Democrats, have special rights to influence the outcome of the DNC electoral process for president. These are the people who screwed over Bernie Sanders. Right. So, like, how do you I just can't. We actually put out a short, and the title of it was "It's Gotta Suck to Be a Democrat Partisan Right Now." You know what I mean? Because you got to feel like such a rock in the hard place. You got to feel like such a I can't win, because I'm sure they're probably super concerned about Gaza. Well, who are they going to vote for? I'm sure they're super concerned about, what they see as, policing and problems in American policing and stuff like that. And you're going to put in a huge prosecutor, attorney general, and for president now, just because she has the right color skin. Like, that doesn't make any sense. If there are all those principled partisan Democrats who really are progressive, who do you vote for? Well, you don't vote for Trump. You vote for the other guy, right? Like, that's where you're at. That is a terrible position. And I, as a Republican and a libertarian type, like, those, I sympathize with that position. I'm putting that position all the time, but it's so obvious right now that the fix is in for those voters, that they just really have no democratic rights process voice at all, because of how this is all shaken out.
Yeah. You mentioned some surprises in October. What sorts of things do you have in mind, or
Yeah.
hypothesizing, or what like this has been the craziest probably 2 months that I can remember
Yes, sir.
in terms of political things, and well, I guess just current, what you would classify as current events in school.
Yep.
Um I don't even know. I don't even know where to go. I remember Tucker some months ago predicted that the only thing left for Trump was to try and take a shot at him, which they did, or
Mm-hmm.
whoever did. I'll say somebody did. Um, Allegedly. No, they did. I don't know. Anyways, but like, what are you thinking for like what did you have in mind?
I think the stolen valor narrative, there's going to be a super PAC going to buy hundreds of millions of dollars on that. I think we're going to see a lot of mashups of Kamala saying very dumb things. I think we're going to find infidelity arguments coming out soon about Kamala and her husband and that relationship. That's going to get spiked really big. And I do wonder, like, if the kind of far left is really going to try to spike on Kamala and really try to drive a narrative that, she's not who we want, and, like, I don't know if they're going to be cowed into caring about Trump so much that they're going to willing to do that, because they've just been backed into such a terrible corner for such a long time. So I think there will be lots of accusations of supporting genocide on the left that are going to come against Kamala, and that's going to be difficult for them to overcome, because that is a very splitting issue for their party. I don't think that's over yet by far, especially as special military operations are deployed to the Middle East. We have I've seen everywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 Marines being deployed, a battleship, 4 battleships, a aircraft carrier, and yeah, that's a lot being deployed to the Middle East right now. So that was kind of impending. Oh my God, we're going to get into another forever war, this time with Iran, maybe. Those sorts of things are all still on the table, and could happen. And it wouldn't be the first time a president started a little war right before leaving office in order to try to hook in and keep power.
Yeah. So I don't even know where to go with that. Just not from this conversation, but just like it just seems everything could go any which way, and the predictions
Sure.
of. So well, let's say Trump wins. Are we? Part of me is worried, as we saw during the summer of 2020, the riots and things of that nature.
Mhm.
The other part of me feels like it's a little bit different this time, and I can't tell really.
Mm.
What's if you had to predict? Well, okay, I'm not gonna make you do that. But if like what let's do it this way. If Trump wins, how do you see things going? And then also if Kamala wins, how do you see things going? And like the immediate like reaction sort of, right? People like to talk about January 6th when Trump lost. Go look that up yourselves. I'm not going to anyways. But what do you
Can't
think?
say those words. That's how you get
Yeah,
demonetized, brother.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What do I think? I think it's okay. So I don't. Is the right capable of making that big a mistake again if they lose? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. It's always possible. I don't think we have the same story being played out right now that would indicate that. Right, QAnon was a very fascinating thing happening back then. That's largely dead now. Could get resurrected. You never know. Um, the instability within the Trump coalition isn't maybe as strong as people might think from the outside. So are they able to hold their coalition together and then execute on afterwards? I'm not sure. It depends a lot about how the Senate goes. If the Senate goes Republican, everything looks vastly different than if it maintains in Democrat hands by a thin margin. House, same story. Although I think most mainstream is Republicans are going to control the House into the next cycle. They don't have so much exposure that they're going to be a problem, but you never know. I mean, these things can happen. Surprises do happen. As far as for policy wise, as president, and maybe I'm nerding too close to where you're going, so here, stop me.
No, you're good.
Industrial policy largely doesn't change. Our foreign policy changes in some dimensions, but not every. Obviously, the war in Gaza continues regardless of who's president. The war in Ukraine changes dramatically depending on who's president. I think the Elon Musk interview was an interesting touch point on that. Trump demonstrated a depth of knowledge on NATO expansion that I was surprised by and articulated well exactly why it was a terrible negotiation direction that the Biden administration took with some specificity. So I was really happy about that.
Is that still up somewhere for people to go watch it?
Yeah. Yeah, you can find it. You can find it. It's like been reproduced all over. It's on YouTube. You can find it
Okay.
on Trump's X page, Elon's X page.
Okay.
Yeah. So the what I see is Kursk probably being used in a peace deal under a Trump regime. I think that's a forever war under Kamala for sure. It just makes too much money. There's no reason not to fight the war other than manpower and if you care about human life. But I don't think the blob does very much. As far as for the Middle East and Iran, I think that's a similar story either way. China, it's a similar story either way. Although Trump is maybe more aggressive on China than Kamala is in some dimensions, but they're doing all kinds of the same sort of exercise in the South China Sea. There was just an exercise just outside of Korea, just I think last week, very provocative for China. So I think the foreign policy gains is mostly in avoiding thermonuclear war with Russia, which I'm happy about. If Trump becomes president, and largely does not change our current trajectory if Kamala is. As far as tax policy, you have Trump's going to want cut taxes. Kamala's going to run on cutting taxes on tips, but she's the one who actually created that policy in the first place with the Inflation Reduction Act, which did nothing to reduce inflation, of course, and was really a green jobs bill. So I think we'll see more stimulus under Kamala, more spending bills of that sort, which is basically, in my view, largely just handing out, favors and money to favored groups of their coalition. Yeah, that's all I did. I don't see many other things changing fundamentally from there.
Yeah.
Regulatory reform, Trump will definitely double down on regulatory reform. I think the large lesson they got from the economic growth from 2016 to 2019 was cutting taxes, deregulation was like proven in their mind. So I think we're going to see that leaned in a heavy way. Hopefully different cabinet members, hopefully different staff members, stuff like that.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Last couple things. What do you make of the RFK Jr. situation now? It seemed maybe 8 months ago at the beginning of the year that he was in a position to kind of make some waves. And
Mhm.
then I think his Israel position came out, and then after that he was kind of tanked a little bit, and then obviously with the rules for the debate, he wasn't allowed on the stage, which I also think would have made things very, very interesting.
Mhm.
But what do you make of his kind of position now? There was a phone call with him and Trump that was leaked shortly after the assassination attempt. Um, there was a report that came out, I think yesterday, that said he was going to endorse Kamala, and then he came out shortly after that and tweeted that he was doing no such thing. What do you make of his position in the race, potential impacts, things like that?
So if I understand it right, it was RFK turned down Trump for a cabinet position. If I
I'm not
understand it,
sure.
no. And that seems indicative to me. Trump has more to lose from RFK than Kamala does, maybe in Trump's mind. It's also the simpler things are, the more better you can predict on where to spend money. Three-way races are more difficult than two-way races just by the nature of the variables at play. So if you talk about an issue one way, it gains and loses no matter what you do. If you are in a three-way race, where that's a little bit cleaner in a two-way race, you have clear trade-offs that you're presenting in front of the voter. So does Kamala feel the same way? I mean, it seems to me that I think you're right, if he had maintained a strong non-interventionist policy in Gaza, it would be a major threat to Kamala, right? Because they'd lose all the disaffected leftists. But given the position he's taken, he's largely become more a threat to Trump, specifically because Trump refuses to admit he was wrong about 2020 and the vaccine and situations like that, where RFK is strongest at. Now, both of them are now kind of duplicating libertarian-esque talking points to try to cultivate a similar audience. So I think in the current model, although I haven't seen polling on this, I mean, I'm very curious what the data would look like. Who's polling more from whom? And I think RFK might be polling more from disaffected Trump, but that might be different too after the assassination attempt, where that dynamic might have changed. So in most cases, most people kind of think easily put candidates into, they're either taking this group or this troop, and that's not usually how it is. Most third-party candidates actually take people who aren't going to vote and get them to vote. And then they take a little bit from both sides. But the bulk is actually new voters. Because, and think about it, only about 60 to 70% of people vote. So anywhere in that, you can get hundreds of thousands, if not millions of votes just out of all the people who just don't vote every year.
Yeah.
What role it will play? I don't know. To be completely honest with you, I got to look at the data more.
It seemed it seemed like it's been diminishing what his potential impact could be, at least recently, but that also could be a facade based on the news cycle. Yeah, go ahead.
There's also Kamala this week. Definitely reached out to RFK reached out to Kamala's campaign to talk about a potential cabinet position. What's that?
He said he would never do that.
Oh,
Yeah,
and
he said he came out and said he wouldn't do it. Yeah.
this is reporting from MSN from an anonymous person in the campaign saying this to the reporter. Now he's now publicly declared that wouldn't be something he would do.
He tweeted
And
it.
his VP candidate said the same.
Yeah.
That's this is negotiation, right? So it could be that he did that and is now backtracking. You lie in politics. That's what people do. So you can't take that off its face. And that what that might indicate is either he's like, okay, I'm actually not helping what I wanted to help, part of my goals of this campaign, or it could be straight up an operation from someone within the DNC to place somebody in his campaign that then leaks information to the press and make him look bad. So
that would seem like a weird thing for him to do based on his stance on COVID and big pharma, to want to go that direction.
I don't know. It doesn't make any sense with Ukraine. Kamala is the architect of the Ukraine policy. She's the architect of our current border policy with Mexico. Both things that RFK is running hard on, and I'd be surprised from that. But also, politics makes strange bedfellows, right? You give someone a Secretary of State role. That's a big deal, dude. That's a big difference, especially for a family like the Kennedys.
Is that, I don't know, I'm speculating at this point, but maybe is there something in his mind that's like, okay, if she gives me, using the Secretary of State example, that I can affect Ukraine more? Is that maybe the calculus? I don't really know.
It is true that one of the theories of the president is, the president is CEO versus president as like what our Schoolhouse Rocks version of it is, right? The president doesn't really control any individual policy, just kind of governs like the overall direction, right? Each president probably has a different flavor or feel to that. That's true within congressional offices. I can guarantee you that. Some congressional offices, the member is very much involved in policy, and other ones, it's just, what do the RNC lawyers say? We vote that way, right? So with Kamala, I would guess it would be more, what do the RNC lawyers say? Meaning, what do the generals say? What do the military contractors say? What do the people who are actually on the ground? What do the interest groups that I care about that maintain my power say? While that's not RFK's, seems to me, especially when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, he's articulated that as an immoral war provoked by the United States, not a simply, I don't know, a thing we got to do because Russia's an aggressive belligerent, right? So that kind of difference in character, it seems to me to be like he wouldn't have the aptitude or possibility of running a different Ukraine policy than what Kamala would set.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, well, speaking of that war, I heard recently that it seems to be bleeding over into Russia, and I think there's some things going on outside of the Ukrainian borders now. Can you kind of give a maybe status update on what's going on over there? How much
Yeah.
you know?
So a couple months ago, there was a major offensive in Russian territories and bombing into Russian civilian areas, as well as an aquatic offense using drones mostly in Crimea, which has been Russian controlled since the Obama administration. What happened just in the last 2 weeks was a counteroffensive into a province called Kursk, which has not so far been part of the fighting, except like it's not part of the invasion territories that went from Russia into Ukraine. So think about it like this. It's kind of like when you're playing checkers and they advance on one side of the board, you kind of opposite advance on the opposite side of the board, or even in chess. It's to divert resources away from the front line to having them to do not just offense, but offense and defense. You get your opponent doing both, you're in a better position. Second, Vladimir Putin himself has said this is not really militarily viable or useful to Ukraine, and he publicly speculates that it is a negotiation tactic, because that's useful on two levels for him. One, you say it's a negotiation tactic, you say like it's not a big deal, right? It's land that isn't of the same value as the land we've taken. And not for Russia's point of view, right? It's only a matter of time for Russia can retake that land. They have a much, much, much larger population and industrial base and stuff like that. So it's going to be very difficult for them to maintain that forever. In fact, there was reporting out of antiwar.com yesterday, that said that most of NATO already agrees with that assessment. But it is a wise negotiation tactic, because at least then if you come to the table, you can say, well, you can take this bloodless now if you give us this part. And then you can actually hopefully get to the table and actually discuss it. I don't think that happens while Biden's president. I just don't see it.
Well,
He
would have
there's
to
no
leave his
agreement there.
basement to do that.
Yeah,
So,
right. Well, I mean, with the current Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense, I don't see that happening.
yeah.
Not at all.
Is there anything? I saw something about something in German involving Germany as well. Am I making that up? I don't know.
You mean the Nord Stream reporting that happened
Maybe that's what it is.
last night?
Recently?
Yeah, so the New York Times put out some new information on, not new, it's hard to actually articulate it that way. It's more like information about the Nord Stream pipeline investigation. And they kind of do it in parallel to the Der Spiegel investigation that's been going on since it all went down. And German National Police and the BGM, I think their intelligence agency, basically saying that it was a Ukrainian plot approved of by Zelensky and then canceled, but then either not canceled early enough or canceled like indecisively enough that it didn't actually get stopped in time for the thing to be executed. So that would indicate that Ukraine themselves attacked a NATO member.
Well,
That's thus triggering Article 5, in which case we should be going to war against Ukraine now, just to be clear, Eric. That's what it implies.
well, David, you're making too much sense and following what's actually written on the paper. Okay, well, that's an interesting turn of events for sure. What else is going? Okay, so I've heard a lot of Iran talk recently. I know we're coming a little bit to the end, but if you want to give a brief update on that as well for those listening, a lot of this happened when I was on vacation, and I came back to craziness. Well, it was already crazy. It was already crazy, but yeah.
So if you go on TikTok right now, you'll find a lot of videos like, oh, Iran is selling weapons to Russia, and Russia's selling weapons to Iran. Oh, they're planning a wider regional war. Now, I do think there's a possibility there. I did mention earlier the redeployment of various different U.S. assets to the Middle East. We already have assets there specifically to like confront the Houthis and like what they're doing in what's that strait called right now? The Arabian Peninsula, off the Arabian Peninsula. The the real question about Iran right now is after a series of assassination attempts, including one in Tehran, right? Mossad planted a bomb possibly months before and then detonated it when this particular, it was a Hamas or Hezbollah leader. I can't remember. Let me remember 1 second. I'm looking at the wrong thing. That's my problem. Oh, here we go. Yeah. He was Hezbollah senior commander. And then, no, Hamas leader. Yeah, sorry. Hamas leader in Tehran. And then later in Beirut, a Hezbollah leader, right?
Mhm.
So Hamas, if you're not up on politics, Hamas is the political leader of Gaza, additionally to a internationally recognized terrorist group, and Hezbollah is the Shia Muslim kind of faction of terrorist, like non-state actor people that in Lebanon and in some in the West Bank, I hear, but mostly Lebanon and Syria that operate, as partially funded by Iran. So they're seen as like a non-state actor faction of Iran, much like, yeah. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So those two assassination attempts, this kind of like has the world holding their breath. What's Iran going to do? Last time this happened, they blew up a guy in a embassy or like right next to an embassy or something like that. And there was a major rocket attack from Iran. Now that rocket attack, most people don't remember, was actually signaled by Iran. They said, on this date, we're going to attack you and we're going to send these rockets. And then they very clearly were kind of signaling, stop me now, please stop me now. You ever seen a Hook when he's about to commit suicide? No, you haven't seen that? Yeah, it's like that. It's a kid's movie from back in the day. And Captain Hook is going to be like, I'm going to end it all. Stop me, Shmi. And he's got the gun to the head. He's like,
oh yeah.
Stop me. That's the sort of thing that's kind of going on with Iran. Is what they've done traditionally is a tit for tat in order to maintain face across the Muslim world. That hasn't happened yet. It's been 2 weeks, and we're kind of like pins and needles. What's Iran going to do in response to this? Is it a new amplification? Is it going to escalate the war? Is it going to do what they've traditionally done? And they did this after the Soleimani killing, and they did this after the last round last year was, a tit for tat, a minimal tit for tat, exchange a few times and then be done. Maybe it won't be that way this time. We'll see. Because we know they have weapons they haven't deployed yet. We know they have drone technology that they haven't deployed yet in the theater of war. Iran is not Afghanistan. Iran is not Iraq. It is a very different country from those two. They modernized much earlier, much faster than those two other countries under the Shah, and have a much larger population and technical population for lots of regions. A lot of them Western educated from pretty much a founding of a country till the 1960s. So they have much more sophisticated economies. Therefore, they present a much bigger threat. And therefore, the deployment of weapons and artillery and manpower to the Middle East from America is a substantial difference. And it could mean that threat is real. It could be just posturing for the election. We don't really know. And that's the tragedy of it. We don't need a declaration of war to go against the war of Iran because they can just declare it. The president can just say, well, I do this under the 2001 AUMF and just can do whatever I want. That's how lawless our laws are. our legal system is. It doesn't make any sense. It's non-constitutional. It isn't a thing. So it's never going to be debated even if it were to come up. Although, what's his name? Lindsey Graham introduced an AUMF, an authorization to use military force against Iran. For what? Not for attacking Israel, but for trying to develop nuclear weapons. Something they've been accusing Iran of doing since the 1980s.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well,
that happened last week.
Well, David, you filled everyone with optimism and hope.
That's what I do. Optimism and hope, brother. That's my industry.
So, well, with that said, do you have any last nickels before we get you out of here?
Hey, man, everything's going to be all right. Keep building your podcast, keep doing your thing. Everything's going to be okay. We're going to figure it out. All
right. Well, for the people listening, what should they be looking out for and paying attention to? Any last nickels for them?
Yeah, this election season is going to be crazy, but keep your head on your shoulders, keep your eyes on a swivel. Beware of, COINTELPRO exists. It's real. The media exists large part to manufacturer consent. So don't give it without careful thought.
That's a good piece of advice. All right, guys. Linked to the Human Reaction podcast in the description as always. And thank you for listening, and we will see you guys next time. Peace.
Peace.